AITA for getting upset after my husband pranked me by yelling, "Fire." Even though he knew about my past trauma? Imagine you're resting peacefully, the warm comfort of sleep enveloping you. And then suddenly, you're thrust into chaos. Screams and alarms blend into a piercing shriek that echoes in your mind. You scramble, half awake, heart pounding, searching for something, anything that makes sense. Panic surges, your feet touch the ground, trembling beneath the weight of raw fear. Yet you have no choice but to move. You are desperately trying to escape from a fire that may very well not be real. This is how we begin the story of a woman named Eliza. A woman who has lived through both literal and figurative fires. Fires that consumed not only her home but her heart and her belief in love. And yet, out of these fires, she arose not as someone unbroken but as someone reborn. This story is about Eliza's journey through the trials that were thrust upon her and the strength she never knew she had to rise out of those flames. From the outside, Eliza's life seemed ordinary. She was married to a man named Greg, a jovial character who could charm his way through most rooms. They were expecting their first child and had been married for 5 years. But behind closed doors, Eliza's life was filled with shadows, remnants of past traumas she could never quite shake. At the core of her anxiety was a house fire from her teenage years. A fire that had stolen her childhood home, her beloved pet, and her sense of security. Greg knew all about it. He knew how deeply it had scarred her, leaving her fearful of the very thought of flames. But despite knowing this, Greg had decided one night to turn her fears into a joke. It had been late, and Eliza, feeling the weight of her pregnancy, had gone to bed early. She awoke to her husband's frantic cries, yelling that there was a fire. The words echoed in her ears like the call of a ghost from her past, an echo that carried her back to the teenage years of her mother and brother shouting as they crawled through a smoke-filled hallway. Her body jerked into action, her mind running on autopilot as she grabbed her purse, scrambling downstairs, calling for her husband to follow. The world seemed surreal, time dragging, yet her panic made it all spin so quickly. But then, Greg started laughing. Eliza stood frozen, the sound of his laughter snapping her out of her autopilot state. The fear hadn't left her body, it had only been multiplied by confusion. And then, it dawned on her, this was a prank. A harmless joke, as Greg called it. It took only seconds for confusion to give way to despair. Tears began to spill as her knees gave out, and she sobbed on the living room couch, body convulsing under the weight of panic and hurt. Greg's laughter faded. He apologized, yes, but only until the inconvenience of her tears went on too long for him. After a while, his apologies were replaced with annoyance. "You're being dramatic," he had said, an edge of frustration in his voice. It was just a joke. He expected her to stop crying, to lighten up, to let him off the hook for using her greatest fear as a source of entertainment. It would have been easy to say that was the breaking point. The moment Eliza realized that something was deeply wrong in her marriage. But it wasn't. Eliza apologized to Greg. She felt guilty. Maybe she was too sensitive. Maybe she did overreact. But deep down, something had begun to fracture. It was as if a crack had formed in the glass of their relationship. It was a small crack, but it spread quickly and began to shatter everything she thought she knew about her life. A week later, Eliza went into preterm labor. At only 35 weeks pregnant, she welcomed her baby into the world, a tiny, fragile life that she promised to love and protect. She had expected that Greg would step up. She believed that holding his child would change him, that it would bring out the best parts of him. But instead, as the days wore on, Greg only seemed more distant, more irritable. Eliza's fears were further confirmed when she began noticing Greg's anger rising unpredictably. His frustration spilled over small things. And it wasn't long before it spilled onto her. The worst of it came one afternoon. Just a week after they had brought their baby home, Greg walked in on her Googling the signs of an abusive marriage, something she had never imagined she would do. That's when his anger exploded. He beat her, leaving her unconscious on the living room floor, her infant daughter wailing from her crib. This moment of sheer horror, when she finally regained consciousness, was also the moment of clarity. It was the moment Eliza realized that the fire she had lived through as a child wasn't the only blaze that threatened to consume her. Greg was a different kind of fire, one that would slowly destroy everything if she allowed it to continue. A week later, Eliza made a decision. She picked up her daughter, left the house, and never looked back, with the help of a local women's shelter and the kindness of strangers on the internet. Eliza was able to secure a restraining order and begin divorce proceedings. The strangers who had read her story online, the people who had left her comments of support and encouragement, they gave her the strength to do what she never thought she could do: leave. Eliza had spent her life believing that she was meant to endure, that suffering was something she just had to learn to live with. But now, with her daughter in her arms, she knew that she could no longer endure for herself. She needed to be strong for her baby, to show her that love was never supposed to feel like fear. But Eliza's story doesn't end with leaving Greg. In fact, it was only the beginning of a long, winding journey toward rebuilding her life and rediscovering herself. She moved in with her parents temporarily, and it was during this time that she began reflecting on the relationships she had allowed into her life, why she had stayed with Greg for so long, why she had apologized to him even after his cruel prank. The answers were difficult, but they were necessary. She realized that, in many ways, she had become conditioned to accept mistreatment. Greg wasn't the first person to make her feel small. There had been others before him. There had been friends, teachers, and even family members who had made her feel as though her worth was tied to her ability to endure pain without complaint. But now, with her daughter relying on her, Eliza knew she had to break the cycle. During this time, Eliza also reconnected with old passions. She began painting again, a hobby she had loved as a teenager but had abandoned during her marriage. She found solace in colors and brushstrokes, in creating something beautiful out of the chaos she felt inside. Slowly, she began to heal. Months later, Eliza found herself at a local community center, attending a support group for survivors of domestic abuse. It was there that she met Henry, a kind, soft-spoken man who had also lived through his own share of hardships. Henry was different from anyone Eliza had ever met. He listened without judgment, offered support without expecting anything in return. Over time, a friendship blossomed, and eventually, something more. Henry wasn't just a partner to Eliza, he became her teammate, her cheerleader. He encouraged her to pursue her dreams, to believe in herself again. Together, they started a small business, something Eliza had never imagined she would have the confidence to do. With Henry by her side, she felt capable, strong in a way she had never felt before. But despite the joy she found in her new life, there was still one lingering source of pain: her daughter, Tara. As Tara grew, she began to show signs of resentment toward Eliza. The influence of Greg and his new wife, Dani, weighed heavily on Tara. Dani was everything Eliza wasn't. She was wealthy, glamorous, and indulgent. She let Tara do whatever she wanted, buy whatever she desired. And Eliza, who was trying to teach her daughter responsibility, found herself painted as the bad guy. The breaking point came when Tara, at the age of 16, asked Eliza to give up her parental rights so that Dani could officially adopt her. The request shattered Eliza's heart. She had always known that her relationship with Tara was strained, but she had never imagined that her daughter would want to sever ties completely. But despite the pain, Eliza knew she couldn't force Tara to stay. She had to let her go, even if it broke her. Years passed. Eliza focused on her business, on her relationship with Henry, and on her own healing. She learned to find joy in the small moments, in the way the sun felt on her face during an early morning walk, in the laughter she shared with Henry over a simple dinner. She had built a life that was peaceful, fulfilling, and free from fear. One day, out of the blue, Eliza received a phone call from Tara. It had been years since they had last spoken, and hearing her daughter's voice brought back a flood of emotions. Tara was getting married, and she wanted Eliza to contribute to the wedding expenses. The request left Eliza stunned. Tara spoke as if the years of silence, the pain of their estrangement, had never happened. She spoke as if Eliza owed her something. Eliza took a deep breath and told Tara the truth. She wasn't going to simply forgive and forget everything that had happened. She wasn't going to contribute to a wedding when her daughter had chosen to cut her out of her life. Tara was furious. She called Eliza selfish, accused her of not caring. The words stung, but Eliza knew she was making the right decision. After the call ended, Eliza sat in silence, the weight of the conversation settling over her. She had always dreamed of reconnecting with Tara, of mending their relationship. But now, she realized that some things were beyond her control. She couldn't change the past. And she couldn't force her daughter to see her differently. All she could do was live her life with integrity. To be the best version of herself. Regardless of whether Tara ever came back. And so, Eliza continued to move forward. She poured her energy into her business, into her relationship with Henry, and into her own well-being. She found joy in the life she had built. A life that was full of love, laughter, and purpose. She had escaped the fires of her past. And though the scars remained, they were a testament to her strength. Eliza's story is a powerful reminder that strength is not about enduring pain silently. It's about recognizing when enough is enough and having the courage to walk away. It's about understanding that love should never come at the cost of your safety or your dignity. Eliza had to learn that the hard way. But in doing so, she found a life that was more beautiful and fulfilling than she ever imagined. This story also speaks to the complexity of relationships, especially those between parents and children. Sometimes, despite our best efforts, relationships break, and while it's natural to grieve those losses, it's also important to remember that our worth is not defined by someone else's ability to see it. Eliza loved her daughter deeply, but she also knew that she couldn't compromise her own well-being in an attempt to win her back. And that, too, is a form of love, a love that respects both oneself and the other person enough to let go. Finally, Eliza's journey teaches us about the power of community and the kindness of strangers. It was the encouragement of people she had never met that gave her the strength to leave Greg. It was the support of a community center that helped her heal. And it was the love of a good man, Henry, that reminded her that she was deserving of happiness. No one is meant to go through life alone. And sometimes, the greatest sources of strength come from the places we least expect. Eliza's story is not just about survival, it's about rebirth. It's about finding beauty in the ashes and realizing that, even after the most devastating fires, it is possible to rebuild. And what you build may just be stronger and more beautiful than anything you lost. AITA for being upset that my new friend group thinks I'm anorexic and is planning an intervention. Even though I have celiac disease. Growing up, I always had a complicated relationship with my parents. Their divorce when I was very young shaped my childhood in ways I couldn't understand back then. My mom, always warm and nurturing, took care of me for most of the year. Summers were spent with my dad, an experience I'd learned to dread. My dad, well, he was a character all on his own, stubborn and unyielding. He had a worldview that left little room for change or compromise. Every summer, I traveled to his home, expecting weeks of what should have been carefree moments. Instead, I found myself sick, not just a little off, but violently ill, nausea, unbearable cramps, rashes that wouldn't go away. As I got older, even my periods started to go missing. It felt like my body was turning against me. But it wasn't just physical. There was an emotional component that was impossible to ignore. My dad's house seemed like a war zone, and I was stuck in the trenches. He mocked my attempts at eating healthy. Throwing carrots I'd sneaked into the house into the trash. He'd call me names, labeling my habits as silly, a way to get attention. He thought I was trying to imitate my mom, who was health conscious and always opted for organic foods. The doctors I visited at the time didn't offer much help. They told me it was stress, perhaps a psychosomatic response to my parents' divorce. They said I needed therapy. But my dad scoffed at the idea of mental health care. So, I tried to survive the summers without answers, turning down food I wasn't sure about, avoiding anything that could set off those dreaded symptoms. It became easier to pretend to be a picky eater than to explain the mess that was happening inside my body. When I turned 16, a new girl joined my school. We clicked right away, and we became fast friends. I noticed she always avoided the same foods I did. And when I mentioned it to her, she looked concerned. She said she had celiac disease and urged me to get checked. Her words seemed almost like a lifeline. I decided to get tested. And just like that, everything clicked into place. I had celiac disease. The day I received my diagnosis was strangely liberating. For the first time, I had an answer. I wasn't faking it. It wasn't just in my head. And I wasn't alone. I wanted everyone to know that I finally had an explanation for all those years of suffering. I told my friends, expecting support, but the response wasn't what I had hoped for. They accused me of making it up for attention, dismissing my pain as just another teenage drama. I remember confronting my closest friend about it, crying, trying to make her understand how real it all was. She was horrified by my reaction, and that confrontation made her my biggest supporter. But the damage was done, the others still thought I was faking it. And we eventually went our separate ways. The next 2 summers with my dad were more of the same. He refused to believe my diagnosis. He accused me of wanting to feel special, of making up medical conditions because I thought I was better than him. The food he fed me became weapons. He'd secretly put gluten in my meals and then taunt me as I lay sick. I offered to bring him to my doctor to understand what was happening, but he dismissed them as frauds. The experience hardened me. It made me wary of telling new people about my condition. It wasn't that I was ashamed, but I was scared. Scared of the rejection, scared of the judgment. By the time I moved away from my dad, I'd learned to keep my condition to myself. I moved on, started over, and made new friends. One of my closest friends, let's call her Laura, came along with me. And together we found a group of people who loved the same things we did. We played role-playing games, hung out every weekend, and for a while, it felt like I could finally be just another teenager. But even this new beginning wasn't without its shadows. My new friends noticed my eating habits. I would always turn down food offered to me. I was cautious, and my physical appearance had changed, a result of the stress of dealing with my dad. One day, Laura came to me looking worried. She said the group had been talking and that they were convinced I was anorexic. They planned an intervention for the coming weekend. My heart sank. I thought I was finally free of having to explain myself over and over again. And yet, here I was, once more feeling like an outsider in my own life. The intervention day came. It was awkward, tense. Laura came with me for support. One of my friends, Zach, was supposed to lead it. He fumbled, clearly unsure of how to broach the subject, and then finally blurted out what everyone was thinking. They believed I was anorexic. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my emotions in check. I explained everything, the years of being sick, the eventual diagnosis, the struggles with my dad. Zach looked stunned, and I could see the others watching, unsure of how to react. He asked me why I hadn't just told them earlier. It was a fair question, but one that hurt to answer. I told him about the fear, about losing friends before, about my dad and his complete disregard for my health. The group fell silent, and for a moment, I thought I'd lost them too. But then, one by one, they came up to me. They apologized. They admitted they were wrong. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. As I navigated this new chapter of my life, there were still challenges, ones that had nothing to do with celiac disease. My cousin, Julia, who used to be close to me, began dating my ex-boyfriend. We had parted ways years ago, but the relationship had been toxic. He was controlling and manipulative, and I regretted ever being with him. When Julia and Louis started dating, I tried to be supportive, but it was too much. I chose to distance myself. This decision drove a wedge between us. And before long, Julia started spreading rumors about me, calling me unethical, accusing me of things I never did. She told everyone that I had been the reason for my breakup with Louis, that I was a flirt, that I'd cheated on him. None of it was true. At first, I chose to stay quiet. I didn't want to stoop to her level, didn't want to get caught in the web of drama she was spinning. But when she made a speech at her wedding, throwing shade at me without mentioning my name, I knew I had to do something. I found old screenshots, messages that showed the truth of what had happened. I posted them online without any caption, knowing that the truth would speak for itself. The backlash was immediate. The people who had sided with Julia started to see her true colors. My aunt, Julia's mother, who had always supported her, turned away. She was devastated by her daughter's actions, by the lies she had told. Without her mother's financial support, Julia struggled. She reached out to me, asking for forgiveness, asking me to talk to her mom. I refused. I knew her apology wasn't genuine. She was only sorry because she needed something from me. Months passed, and the situation escalated. Julia and Louis became desperate. They began harassing me, creating fake social media accounts to contact me. One night, they even tried to break into my house. I called the police, and they were caught trying to flee. They claimed they weren't trying to steal anything, just wanted to intimidate me. It was a ridiculous excuse, and one that landed them in jail. My aunt refused to bail them out, and I decided to press charges. It was a turning point for me. For so long, I had let the fear of judgment control my life. I'd hidden my disease. I'd stayed quiet when people spread lies about me. And I tried to keep the peace at the expense of my own well-being. But now, I realized that standing up for myself wasn't wrong. It wasn't selfish. It was necessary. I learned that people will always have their own opinions, their own narratives. Sometimes, they'll twist the truth to fit their version of events. But the truth has a way of coming out, even if it takes time. I also learned the importance of having people in your corner, friends like Laura, who stood by me when others didn't. It's easy to feel alone when you're struggling, but true friends will show up when it matters most. The story of my life isn't just about celiac disease or toxic relationships. It's about resilience, about learning to trust myself, even when others didn't. It's about realizing that I am not defined by my illness or the rumors people spread about me. I am defined by my strength, by my ability to keep going even when things get tough. If you're watching this and you've ever felt misunderstood, if you've ever been judged unfairly, know that you're not alone. It's okay to stand up for yourself. It's okay to let go of people who bring negativity into your life. And most importantly, it's okay to prioritize your own well-being. Life is too short to live in the shadows of other people's expectations. You deserve to be happy. You deserve to be heard. And you deserve to live your life authentically, without fear of judgment.